Most personal finance advice sounds logical. Save more, invest early, avoid debt, spend less than you earn. On paper, none of that is wrong. The problem is that when normal people try to apply this advice in real life, it often breaks. Not because they're irresponsible or undisciplined, but because the advice assumes conditions that simply don't exist for most people. Think about how money advice is usually presented. It's clean, simple, and optimized. The numbers always work. There's always extra money left over. But real life isn't optimized. Real life has rent increases, medical bills, car repairs, family responsibilities, and stagnant wages. When advice ignores those realities, it stops being helpful and starts making people feel like they're failing. Most people don't wake up wanting to be bad with money. They want stability. They want to stop stressing about bills. They want to feel like they're moving forward instead of just surviving. Yet the more financial content they consume, the more behind they feel. That's not accidental. That's a mismatch between who the advice is designed for and who's trying to follow it. When I say normal people, I'm not talking down to anyone. I'm talking about the majority. People with average incomes, people who didn't start investing at 18, people who made financial mistakes before they understood money, people whose paychecks are already spoken for before they arrive. That is normal, even if financial media rarely treats it that way. A lot of popular financial advice comes from people who already won the game. Sometimes they're investors who benefited from decades of economic growth. Sometimes they're entrepreneurs who took risks that paid off. Sometimes they're content creators whose income doesn't resemble a normal salary anymore. Their advice isn't always wrong, but it's incomplete. It's spoken from the finish line, not from the middle of the race. Take long-term investing advice as an example. When someone like Warren Buffett talks about investing consistently over decades, the core idea is solid. Compounding works. Time matters. But that advice assumes you can consistently invest without interruption. It assumes your income is stable enough that market downturns don't force you to sell. It assumes you can wait out volatility without touching the money. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, those assumptions don't hold. The advice isn't false, but it's not fully usable without context. This is where most people start blaming themselves. They hear the advice, they try to follow it, and when it doesn't work, they assume they lack discipline. They think they're bad with money. They think everyone else has it figured out except them. What they don't realize is that the advice wasn't designed for their financial reality in the first place. Most personal finance advice assumes the existence of surplus, extra money after bills, extra capacity to optimize, extra margin for error. But if your income barely covers your life, optimization has limited impact. You can track every dollar perfectly and still feel stuck. At that point, the problem isn't budgeting skill, it's structural. That doesn't mean personal responsibility doesn't matter. It does. But responsibility without realism turns into shame. And shame is one of the biggest reasons people avoid dealing with money altogether. When every financial conversation makes you feel inadequate, the natural response is avoidance. Another issue is how financial success is framed online. Success is often shown as extremes: extremely high income, extremely early investing, extremely aggressive strategies. The middle is rarely shown, even though that's where most people live. This creates a distorted benchmark. People compare their normal progress to someone else's highlight reel and conclude they're behind, even when they're doing reasonably well given their situation. This channel exists to correct that distortion, not by lowering standards, but by grounding them. Money decisions should be judged based on context, not comparison. A good decision at one income level might be a bad decision at another. What matters is not copying strategies, but understanding principles and applying them realistically. One of the biggest mistakes normal people make is trying to run advanced strategies before they have a stable foundation, investing before cash flow is under control, optimizing taxes before understanding spending, chasing returns before building resilience. These strategies sound smart, but without stability, they add stress instead of progress. Stability is underrated in personal finance because it's not flashy, it doesn't produce viral screenshots, but stability is what allows everything else to work. Emergency savings, predictable expenses, manageable debt. Without these, even good strategies fall apart under pressure. Debt is another area where advice often lacks nuance. You'll hear that all debt is bad or that certain debt is good. Reality is more complicated. Debt can be a tool or a trap depending on income stability, interest rates, and behavior. Telling someone to aggressively pay down low-interest debt when they have no savings might feel responsible, but it can actually increase financial fragility. Normal personal finance is about trade-offs. Every decision has a cost. Paying off debt faster means less liquidity. Saving aggressively might delay other priorities. Investing early might increase risk when income is uncertain. Good advice doesn't pretend these trade-offs don't exist. It explains them so people can choose consciously. Another overlooked factor is timing. Advice that works well at one stage of life can be harmful at another. Early career instability requires different priorities than mid-career growth. Someone supporting family members faces different constraints than someone supporting only themselves. Ignoring timing leads to rigid advice that doesn't adapt to real lives. Financial content often treats money like a math problem. Earn more, spend less, invest the difference. But money is also emotional. Stress affects decisions. Fear affects risk tolerance. Exhaustion affects discipline. Pretending those factors don't exist makes advice feel cold and unrealistic. Normal people don't fail financially because they don't know what a Roth IRA is. They struggle because income growth is slow, costs rise faster than wages, and one unexpected expense can undo months of progress. Understanding that reality changes how we approach money. This doesn't mean giving up or lowering expectations. It means setting priorities in the right order. Before asking how to invest, the question should be whether income is stable enough to support it. Before optimizing returns, the question should be whether basic risks are covered. Before comparing yourself to others, the question should be whether your decisions make sense for your situation. The goal of personal finance isn't to win some abstract game. It's to reduce stress, increase options, and build control over time. For normal people, progress often looks slow at first. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It means it's being built on a foundation that can actually last. A lot of financial frustration comes from trying to force progress faster than reality allows. When income is limited, patience matters more than complexity. Consistency matters more than optimization. Avoiding big mistakes matters more than chasing perfect decisions. This channel isn't about shortcuts. It's about understanding how money works when conditions aren't ideal. It's about making reasonable decisions with limited resources. It's about removing the shame from normal financial struggles and replacing it with clarity. If you've ever felt like financial advice makes sense for everyone except you, that feeling is valid. Not because you're incapable, but because the advice wasn't speaking to your situation. Once you understand that, money stops feeling like a personal failure and starts feeling like a problem you can actually work through. That's what we'll do here. We'll talk about money the way it actually functions in normal lives. Not extremes, not fantasies, just realistic, grounded personal finance that respects where people are starting from.